Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'm E.C. Woodham, author of the new adult summer beach book right here, The Lights Out Club, and working on a new project to hopefully publish in the early winter months. Today I'm going to be talking to you guys a little bit about my writing process, just an overall view of how I go from an idea, or how I even go from like before I have an idea to the very final stages and ultimately publishing your book. I've only done it once all the way through, but so many people ask me about my process, and so I wanted to come today and share just a little bit about that with you guys. So if you're ready, we'll get started. So it has been kind of a crazy week here. I'm filming this on a Saturday morning. On Wednesday and Thursday, Hurricane Dorian came through the Charleston area, and we got super lucky. We didn't have that much damage, but it was kind of scary and sort of taught us, I think, what type of hurricane we might need to evacuate for. We were fine. We only lost power for a couple of hours, but yeah. And the sad thing is I only wrote 3,000 words in like 3 days of being off work. I'm not proud of that, but we binge watched so much Game of Thrones. So now it's September. I'm getting back into my groove, or we're already a week into September, which blows my mind, more than a week. So I'm trying to get back into the routine of things, because when there's a mandatory evacuation, which we had starting last Monday until Friday, you can't work. Like, companies cannot, like, by law, cannot compel you to come to work. So my job was closed for the most of the week. So anyway, that was a lot of backstory. So today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about my writing process. I have notes, I do. So a lot of people ask me how do you write a book? How do I do it? And it's such a broad question. There's so many possible answers to it. So I wanted to take a few minutes and just kind of break down my process into very broad, like, to the big steps. And then what I plan to do is break down each step, eventually kind of make its own video about it. We're gonna pause for a coffee break. My favorite coffee shop in town is finally back open. They have power again, which is good. So yes, breaking down my process, and then eventually we'll break down each step a little further. But everyone asks, or a lot of people, not everyone, a lot of new writers will ask me, where do I start? How do you start writing a book? And it's such a tough question to answer. For me, a book starts with an idea. It starts with overhearing a conversation, or hearing a story that someone's telling in the grocery store about. It can be something so small and insignificant. And then, honestly, like, sometimes you can be inspired when you watch a certain movie or you read a certain book. Warning, you do have to guard against, like, making sure that your idea isn't too similar to that. But honestly, that's how it starts for me. I am a notorious eavesdropper. If you ever have a meal with me and anything interesting is going on with the couple next to us or the family next to us, I am listening and watching. I'm really nosy. Last week at dinner, this couple next to us, they were in this crowded, like, sports bar, and I found out from what he was saying that she had told him the day before that she loved him, and he didn't respond well. And he was apologizing and, like, making up for it. And anyway, it's things like that, like human interactions, that I think really spark my writing process, or my creative mind just, like, snaps into action. So once I have some sort of idea, whether it be like a big idea or just like a little nugget, sorry, my contacts are really bothering me this morning. Then I start brainstorming. And a lot of times when I brainstorm, I ask myself potential questions about the story. What if it was like this? What if this happened? What if that person did this? And that's kind of when I began formulating my characters a little deeper. I think characters are usually the first thing that come to me, which kind of leads me into my next step, which was begin developing your characters. I usually know my characters so well that I could just have a conversation with them. Like, I know the ins and outs. I know the answers to every question that you could fire off at them. And I think that's the way it needs to be. So when you start developing your characters and figuring out what they're like, they're going to help tell you the story, because they're going to kind of dictate how the story goes. I'm trying to think. So an example is the character in my new book, Addie. She is very stubborn and very determined not to live in her hometown, which some of us, I feel like, can definitely relate. You know, you've grown up in a place, you don't want to live there your whole life. So she's very stubborn, and that has sort of dictated all of the choices she's made. She doesn't want to live in her hometown. She doesn't want to, you know, do the things that all of her friends did after high school. So she's always tried to be a little different. And you can kind of see how that, like, being stubborn is one characteristic, but that can kind of map out a character's entire future. Is your character timid? Is your character shy? Like, you have to ask all of these questions and begin formulating that. So once you've brainstormed, then I think it's a good time to start developing your characters. And chances are they're going to be developing in your head long before you even, you know, start putting a pen to paper. I love creating fun characters. I think, I love making a character have, like, very human qualities. So, like, human flaws and human traits, and that sounds weird. Anyway, so then once I've done some brainstorming and I've kind of got my characters in mind, I like to read Save the Cat Writes a Novel. Y'all, that book was just a game changer for me. No one had ever told me anything about writing a book in such simple terms. And I was like, wow, this just all makes sense, you know? And I've read it probably 3 or 4 times now, but each time I start plotting a new idea, I really like to read Save the Cat. And that's when I start plotting an outline. It helps me think of the flow of my story, but I can guarantee you that I'm probably going to go through it at least 2 more times during the process of writing my book. So probably like 3 times I will actually, like, hold my ideas and my story and my manuscript next to Save the Cat and be like, okay, how do I make this that's on the page of the book work? Like, how do I make my novel work based on these steps? And I'm not saying it's a formula. It's not a formula. Every story is different. But that book just, it is a game changer. And I can't recommend it enough. If you're a new writer and you're struggling with plotting and outlining and really kind of figuring out how you want your story to flow, I think that Save the Cat Writes a Novel is a book you need to invest in. So that kind of brings me to the next step, which is outlining. I used to be such an intense outliner and, like, have each place like chapter, and now it's kind of like bullet points. I know how I want the story to flow. I know what I want to happen. But I've kind of started letting the end of a chapter present itself to me. So if I'm like, oh, that's a great place to end a chapter, and then just end it and not try to pack everything into a chapter according to the outlines I've created. So I've become a little bit more loose when it comes to outlines. I hate the word, that doesn't sound right. Like a little bit more of a plantser. So I'm planning, but I'm also pantsing some of it. There's a good question for you. Are you a plotter, pantser, or plantser? Drop it in the box. Drop it in a comment below. If you're not familiar with those terms, a plotter is someone who outlines everything very perfectly like this. A pantser is someone who flies by the seat of his or her pants when drafting or writing, and a plantser is someone who's a combination of both. I am a proud plantser. I used to be a plotter, now I'm a plantser. So once you have your characters developed as much as you can at this point, I feel like as you continue working on your story, your characters will continue to tell you about themselves. So once your character's developed, you have a kind of a good outline or a good idea of where you want the story to go, and you've done a lot of brainstorming. It's time to start drafting. Woohoo! First drafts used to intimidate the hell out of me, and now I've kind of grown. I mean, it's not easy to draft a book in its first draft, but I've started not beating myself up and just kind of remembering that it's going to go through so much work before it ever goes to print. So what's the point in stressing that much over it? I'm actually, if you can see my board behind me, it says September is for drafting. I am drafting the first draft of Project Runaway Beach Bride. I am not as far along as I would like to be in September, so I've got to really get crack-a-lackin' on that. And then in November for NaNoWriMo, I've never done like an authentic NaNoWriMo, so I'm really hoping to draft book 2 of the Lights Out Club series. I'm thinking there's going to be 3 books in that series, but we'll see. So it's time to first draft. I want to do an entire video on first drafts. I'm hoping to launch that sometime in October before NaNoWriMo, kind of as part of Preptober. But with a first draft, my advice to you in a nutshell is just don't beat yourself up over it. Remember that it's a starting point. It's not going to make it to the final cut. So just take a deep breath, write whatever comes to you. If you get stuck somewhere, just put in a little placeholder and be like, come back to this part because you're going to have to edit. Just try not to spend too much time on it. First drafts can hold people up for months, I feel like. And it's so easy to let that happen. So that's my advice, is to don't let yourself get stuck. Just keep going as much as you can. So after you finish your first draft, or after I finish my first draft, I like to set it aside for a couple of weeks, maybe even a month, depending on what I'm working on at the time. And I really like that. Just kind of gives me some time to get away from the story, away from what I've written, and kind of forget about what I've written. And then I can come back to it with a fresh perspective. So then after those 2 weeks are up, I read through my first draft and I make lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of notes. And I basically rip it apart and like, nix this. What does this even mean? This section has to go. I'm really harsh, but that gives me so much work to begin editing. And editing can seem very daunting. My advice to you is, like, if you're editing a story, you have a draft, then copy that document, create another one, and then edit the copy. So you can always look back at where you've come from, or also something that you wrote early on that maybe you want to put back in that you edited out. But just for each draft, I recommend keeping another file, another document. However, if you use Word docs, Google Docs. Editing can be really overwhelming. It's good for me to set a deadline for myself, because otherwise I can really, really drag that out. Excuse me. That was embarrassing. Great. Once I finish editing, I'll go through it a couple of times, like several times editing. First the bigger problems, then some smaller things, and then just kind of go. And then I send my story off to beta readers. And I'm going to tell you guys that, especially as a first-time author, but just in general, sending your book to a beta reader, it is nerve-wracking. Because you are literally putting your book baby that you've worked on and that you're so vulnerable about, and you're giving it to other people to read, and essentially telling them, hi, please point out any flaws, errors, plot holes, anything you see that's wrong with this, point that out. But also, they point out the good things. I am hoping to revamp my beta process for the next time, which I'm hoping to do betas in, I can't remember, like December maybe. If you're interested in being a beta reader for a new adult book set at the beach, drop a comment below and I'll make a note of that. So once I get my beta feedback all back to me, I will compile it, I will compare it, I will look for the big issues. Especially would say look for the things that a lot of people comment on. So if a lot of people said that there was an issue with a character's consistency or something like that, then you probably want to address that. Sometimes people are going to point out things to you that they just personally don't care for. And, I read a book, I beta read for a friend, and I could tell like some of her views on certain issues, they didn't meet, like certain political issues, obviously were not the same as mine. And I just commented and I was like, to me, I don't think this sounds right, but it's all personal. So just remember that some people's feedback can be based off their personal opinions about a certain topic or issue, and that's okay. It's important to have those opinions. You can just also get some really great ideas from beta feedback. My critique partner, I think even before I sent the book to betas, my critique partner was reading it and she was like, it just feels like there's another point of view here, which is how the Lights Out Club came to have 2 points of view. Originally it just had one, and then when she said that, I started thinking about it. It opened my eyes and I was like, dang, I have to add another point of view. But it made the book so much better. But the thing to remember about beta feedback is that it might hurt, but that's okay. You have to be able to receive criticism. Just make sure you ask for constructive feedback, not just someone tearing you apart and tearing you down. And then again, you're going to get some feedback that you just might not agree with. You might be like, oh no, I love this part of the story that this person hated. They said to get rid of it, but I'm not going to. Whew. So betas is a huge, huge step. And then after your beta reading comes another round of editing. And for me, that's a big one. That's where I really start to see the story take shape the way I think it's actually going to look when it comes to print. If you make a lot of big drastic changes, it might be that you want to send out your book again to betas for another round, or at least have maybe a few people read through it and tell you what they think. You could always send it your critique partner, if you have one, which I might do a video on critique partners. I'm not an expert though. Or if you have a writing critique group, but let other people read it after you've made those changes. And honestly, after betas, I probably edit the book fully, 2 or 3 more times, just going through it, making sure that I haven't missed anything, making sure the betas haven't missed anything. And then it's time to head into the publishing phase, which is formatting, proofreading, ordering proofs, letting other people proofread it, reaching a whole new level of vulnerability there. And then ultimately publishing. I kind of skimmed over that part because I'm hoping to do a bit more of a video on how my final publishing phase went, like when I finally finished the book and was like, okay, it's time to format. So yeah, that's my process. Brainstorm, outline characters, outline the book, draft, set it and forget it. That's kind of my fun thing. You guys ever remember those commercials, the set it and forget it commercials? So I like to set my book and forget it for a little while. Then I read through it, edit, beta readers, edit, maybe beta readers again, critique partners, writing critique groups. And yeah, that's my writing process. And for the Lights Out Club, all of that took a grand total of about 18 months to 2 years. And I'm hoping to do it this time in less than 6 months. So yeah, I'm probably going to die. I'm probably going to have anxiety attacks before the end of the year, but that's okay. I also just want to point out, I made a couple notes, I'm checking those, is that the writing process is different for every single writer. And if you are a new writer watching this, you're going to have to find your own process. That's just all I can say about that. And I recommend looking at other writers and seeing what they do. I know there's a lot of videos out there. I'm still perfecting my style, and I think it continues to evolve as I evolve as a writer. But if you have any questions about any steps in the process, drop them in the comments below. I'd be happy to answer them. I am no expert. I'm not an expert, but I can give you some advice, hopefully. Let me know if you have a step in your process that I missed or that I didn't have, because I'm always looking for something else that will help me improve my own style. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have for y'all today. If you're not already, you can follow me on Instagram at ecwoodham. And my website is www.author.ecwoodham. You can find my book, The Lights Out Club, on Amazon. I'll be sure and link it below. And yeah, thanks so much for watching today. Be sure and subscribe, give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, and ring the bell to be notified each time I post a video. And I will see you guys next week.